And we are live. What's going on, brother?
Nothing much, man. It's good to be here. How are
It's
you?
good. It's good to hear from you, man. It's been a little while. I'm good. I'm good. How's it going out by you?
Yeah, it's going well. Just I'm being kept busy as of late with the uni and that. So unfortunately, I've time has been short.
How much longer now until you're finished, until you graduate?
Oh well, 2 years, but I mean this semester and its coursework will be done in the next week, so I'll have more time to kill.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know you said you were working on a paper or something too, right?
Yeah.
How has it been? Has the AI stuff picked up more in the classrooms?
Oh, the AI stuff.
Because I know you were saying they were
Yeah,
like pushing that hard last time.
yeah. We were given a sort of ad hoc lesson on how to properly prompt the AI to do the work for us. Yeah, pretty mind blowing stuff. But yeah, no, actually, there's been nothing else in terms of the other classes. That was only for one class, fortunately.
Ah,
But
are you
yeah,
still a writing major? Is that what you're doing?
no, it says well, I guess it would be a bachelor's of civil engineering, so it's quantity surveying and commercial management.
Jeez, that
So
sounds
yeah.
sounds okay. Sounds
It's,
okay.
no, it's not too bad. It's not too bad.
I got my business management degree, and it was just to finish. It was boring as hell though.
You
Boring. It
you
might as well have been a liberal arts degree.
you guys do like concentrations and majors over there, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're. I mean, they're still you're still taking a whole course of other classes too with it around the majors, what classes you're majoring in. But I mean, I might as well have been a liberal arts degree with how much I bounced around. But so you were telling me, your buddy who just joined us, which I don't, what was his name? I forgot. You didn't. I don't know if you even mentioned it.
Wolf, Wolf,
Oh, he's back.
yeah, Wolf,
Woof.
yeah, Wolf works. That's my
Okay.
dog.
Awesome. Silas, you were mentioning how, what was it that you brought up the other day? The manufacturing of consent through I think digital dystopia, or was there more?
Oh yeah, we were talking about the revelation of the method as a way to manufacture consent for the system that's coming into being, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why um, they have all of the predictive programming, the social priming, the what what we know as the revelation of the method. I don't know if you have anything to add to that with or Aurelius.
Hmm. Yeah, another username I use is just Aurelius. I like
Oh,
Marcus.
I know the Aurelius username. I recognize that from one of the servers. So I'll remember that probably easier than even Wolf.
It's aspirational. I love a lot of his work, and I fall very far short of it. But I'll change this. But yeah, I was able to come to a little bit of a thought I'm a little bit proud of, if I can indulge in a childish moment of, haha, I did something gooder. Revelation of the method, I think, can be compared to something called Duper's delight. Duper's delight tends to happen with individuals. I think revelation of the method is a scaled up systemic version of Duper's delight. I won't go into severe detail about that, but if you read about Duper's delight on your own, and then think about what revelation of the method can be sometimes, I think there's an overlap.
100%. I totally agree. Silas, what about you?
Absolutely, yeah. I think as well, um, this idea of the duper's delight, you see it. I think it's a way for them to almost maintain these hierarchies of control, to maintain the cabal structure itself, right? Because if you have all of these ambitious people working together for a common cause, of course, religion, you've got other control mechanisms binding them together. But when really you when you drill it all down, they have all the money in the world. They have all the, well, at least power, at least in their localized sense. They have all the power. So then the only way to sort of maintain, to stave off the boredom, essentially, to stave off the pure, boredom. The mundane, the mundane sort of climate of their life would be through Duper's delight. I guess they would derive some sort of energy from it. Something that keeps them ticking along.
Well, I mean, and that gets us into like the psychopathic sort of nature of the social engineers. So it makes sense that that's how they would be behaving.
Absolutely. And interestingly as well, we were having a discussion yesterday, me and Aurelius and several others on the hub, and I think Aurelius had some very interesting and poignant remarks to make regarding that. I don't know if you want to go into it, Aurelius, some of the thoughts that you shared yesterday.
We talked about a lot, so I'd appreciate it if you would maybe hone that in a little bit.
Yeah, with cybernetics, let's start with that. I think that's quite interesting. Some of your remarks regarding that, and we were talking about as well the idea of Mavronian dynamics. I think is the term.
Markovian, yes.
Markovian, yeah.
Yeah, I'm new to Markovian dynamics. I'm not a mathematics guy. Markovian dynamics apparently is a statistical and mathematical system often involved in theoretical physics and other things like that. I tend to view it as this is a very crude analogy, but consider yourself as a person, at age 8, at age 13 after puberty, at age 20 or so on after you've become a sexually active adult, age 30 once you've actually kind of fallen into your genuine adulthood, and then if you've hit 40 and plus, how the world changes after that. Now, in terms of cellular replacement, parts of you are not there anymore, right? Ship of Theseus style. But you're still you. But the you that's in existence now isn't really related to the you of your age of 8 or 10 or 13 or even 20, depending on how many decades have passed. You've gone through transition states where many important aspects of your identity have kind of rolled over into your new state. And a lot of that is based just primarily on the state that was previous to it, not the state from 2 or 3 or 4 times before. So that's a very, very rough and imprecise analogy of Markovian dynamics in state changes in your identity, in yourself. I think because of Donald Hoffman's work relating to consciousness, that's where I learned about Markovian dynamics and his kind of explication of changes of state spaces, right, in different iterations. He calls it it's part of his theory of conscious agents, but he talks about, and it's kind of Gnostic in a sense. He's not a Gnostic himself. I think he's a vaguely culturally Christian, but an open-minded, maybe religious seeker. I'm not proselytizing. Please don't mistake my terms. But he talks about the ultimate conscious agent, the one, and this will be mimicked in all kinds of Gnostic and esoteric philosophy. I don't think Hoffman means it that way, but if you talk about if you imagine how your identity kind of unfolded fractally like a flower, finding out your parents lie, that Santa isn't real, whatever those threshold changes of your identity are, they're kind of Markovian, right? You can't mathematically compute it from all your previous states, but your most recent state, right, is what you roll over into your new one. I'm not doing a good job. I'm rambling now. I'm sorry.
No, that makes sense. That makes total sense. That makes total sense.
There was one interesting thing I picked up upon, and by the way, I've just started reading up on this as well. I wasn't even aware of this until you'd brought it up yesterday, and of course, I was you piqued my interest with this idea. and it was something I completely missed when I looked at cybernetics years and years back. But one interesting thing from Markovian dynamics, the idea as well of the Markovian assumption, and I wrote here just when I was reading a couple of articles online regarding it. The dynamics of this self-creation are memoryless.
I was literally just reading that too, and I was about to
Really?
bring that up if you didn't, because that is freaking, that's crazy how much that maps onto the social engineering of like how it works, how it seems to work throughout culture, throughout the ages.
Yeah, well, it states here that the next state of the system is entirely defined by its current state, not its past history. So, in essence, that's, stop me if I'm incorrect here, but thinking about it, it's almost why they have the ridiculousness of the now, because the past doesn't exist, and I don't know if you guys have felt the same, but I don't know, maybe after 2019, certainly after 2020, the whole Corona event, the news cycle has been entirely nonsensical. And even myself, right, I keep up to date with the news, I keep up to date with current affairs, I'm sure you guys do as well. And I actually can't recall what occurred, just 6 months ago in the news cycle. Major events appear to just be sort of fleeting moments, right? They are, they're gone in the wind. And I'm wondering now, does it tie in with this concept of memorylessness? The state of the system is entirely defined by its current state, not its past history. So it's, in a sense, is that the reason for the ridiculousness of it all, the nonsensicalness of it all, almost the stage theatre sense of the world? Is it to maintain this constant forward momentum, never looking back at the past, constantly engrossed in the moment, right? Is this how the state maintains itself? What are your guys' opinions upon that?
I'll wait for our host to speak.
Oh, I was going to say, go ahead, Aurelius, since you know most about this side.
No, I don't know. I'm reminded of the quote from Orwell, who said this, quote, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." That sounds very Markovian to me in hindsight.
I was actually just thinking upon that quote before I jumped onto this this call. Yeah, I was thinking about, that's totally Markovian. And you brought up as well yesterday about the Kamala Harris quote. What is it?
Yeah,
what has been? Yeah, totally Markovian as well.
Yeah, we have to become what will be by being unburdened by what was. I'm butchering the statement, but it was kind of esoteric Marxism, and Marx himself and that whole branch, they're tied into idealist philosophy and a form of semantic or even maybe semiotic sorcery. I think. I know that word sounds a little kind of woo-woo and imprecise, like Deepak Chopra-ish. It's half in jest and half serious. I mean, language has the power to change not only what you do think, but what you can think. And to me, that's a form of sorcery in the darkest sense.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Silas.
Well, this is as well what the state within Kabbalah is, that by the control of the word, one can literally remake the world itself, right? Because again, the word, the rhetoric, affects the I guess you would call it the conscious agent field, right? If we were to use sort of Markovian language, and that, of course, that becomes the new the new architecture, that the perception of people that are affected by that rhetoric, by those words, then project onto reality itself, right? And by project onto reality, we just simply mean, if you believe the lie, if enough people believe a lie, it's given, it doesn't become truth, but it's given the authority of truth, and things like that. Again, this is where doublespeak comes into the equation as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, more so to the aspect of this that Silas was mentioning regarding how it's all very it's almost like absurd. It is like a form of weaponized absurdity. It's a very much what the Shriners would be like sort of known for.
That's a whole apophenic can of worms there, because the Shriners are an outward face of a different form of fraternity.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the weaponized absurdity sort of can be seen as something behind this memoryless state people seem to be in when it comes to their inability. I mean, it's like a mass inability to not really remember things that have happened in our past that seem to constantly reemerge in similar ways that rhyme but not necessarily map on exactly correctly. But it seems like to people, it seems like it's totally new every time it happens.
It has a simple root in common mundane life. Let's imagine you've got a plate of cheese and grapes and crackers, and maybe a cup of coffee in one hand still hot, and you also want a cup of water, but you don't want to make 2 trips, so you grab that cup of water and you realize, hey, I probably won't drop anything up. You know better. You know better to take the 2 trips, but you do it anyway, even though you have decades of experience of wisdom behind you. You do it anyway. You indulge the memorylessness with a low risk gamble for convenience. I think whatever that is, however you can formalize that as a statement, right, in whatever system you choose, it's the same thing in politics and power. It reminds me, and I'm not telling you this is exactly what it is, but it reminds me of primates in a troop where there's an older alpha who is maybe on his last term, let's say, and is still able to command, a downward gaze reflex from everyone, except a bare few who eventually look away but might look back up, right? We do that to ourselves. I'll get away with it. It's nothing. I can do it this time. It happens in power and politics because we don't want to, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone else, we don't want to face some of the horror we have to live with regarding power and human predation. It's I think a similar pattern, fooling ourselves personally and individually about minor aspects of life, and then fooling ourselves about power and control and governance. I think they're 2 expressions of a similar kind of deeper telic structure in our psyches or in our makeup.
Yeah.
There's something else to mention as well, that sort of touching upon reality versus hyper reality, like what you were saying there. The hyper reality is almost tied up with this, again, the Markovian memoryless state. So the hyper reality is almost, quite literally, is the path of least resistance. It becomes ever more sought after as the reality begins to crumble, right? Or as reality becomes even more less compatible with the urbanized environment, the sort of techno-feudal system that we're going into. So then you get almost a virtual reality as a substitute, right? This is where we get the shift into simulacra from. So we go into almost a virtual reality state, a hyper reality state. And again, that becomes more sought after. It becomes massively adopted by the population as a substitute for the objective reality, for the reality that preceded it. It's the same idea that you brought with the analogy of the hot water and the trips, right? So it's we take the path of least resistance, and this is something you see with social engineering too, right? They will create problems and then the sort of psychic funnels that corral the populations into whatever it may be, right? A new area, a new land, a new. I mean, arguably, what occurred in the Bible, in the Old Testament, with the Promised Land, that was simply just a corralment, right? Even if we take the superficial sort of propagandistic story of the Old Testament and the Exodus from Egypt, that itself was a corralment. It was a hyper reality. They were being forced into this new area. Another idea as well is, of course, the Corona event. That brought us into a new it brought us into a new style of thinking, is not necessarily as a citizen anymore, but as a serf. We look to the experts, we look to the government to provide us the answers as to how to actually, just live, and how to behave, and how to, carry out very, very mundane tasks. So these ideas are really tied up with what you were saying as well. This idea of the hyper reality. How do you see that tying in with technology as well?
Go ahead, or
Technology in terms of material technology, cultural technology, all technology, I presume.
Yeah.
We utilize, better, greater, newer, more refined tools to craft these kind of mimetic heavy attractors, right? Sometimes you can't see them directly, but like some force that creates a kind of a basin of attraction, right? That's going to draw a certain number of people who either want the thrill of flirting with that, or who can't resist that change, I guess, in energy curvature or attention economics, and they get drawn into it. People who don't want to take on the or accept the possible self-indictment that you can level on yourself for autarky, right? AUTARKY, being self-sufficient in terms of your agency. That's not the pure meaning of autarky, right? Typically, autarky refers to nations who can provide their own services, raw materials, refinements. They don't need to rely on a critical trade item with other nations, right?
Hmm.
The Russians, for example, have a high degree of autarky, which is why they're being hammered by so many in the West. But that autarky of agency is a responsibility most people don't want to accept. And I think, Silas, the other day we mentioned Japan in this context, and there's an aphorism in Japan that says, "The nail that sticks up will get hammered down." And most people are quite happy to be part of the faceless, part of the tribe. But when they don't, quote, have something to fight for, unquote, they become listless and perhaps self-destructive. It's like children. We're bored. We don't know what to do. They've got bikes and a little glen nearby and all kind, but they're bored. They need something novel. Humans are the same way, except we're afraid to risk reputation, or uh, risk facing mockery, or some form of cruel kind of social status seeking in putting forward these ideas, right? We're not bold. So that's a perfect vector for those who are willing to risk multiple resources, social resources, in determining what to fight for or what new hook to hang an identity on. And if you can rally people around that, as you mentioned, a new frontier, a new country, a promised land, a better future, when you have a group of people who have a genuine sense of community, and when they have, I guess, healthy Dunbar relationships, right? If you know what Dunbar's number is, the number of people you can have a meaningful, direct personal relationship with,
Hmm.
that's a completely different scale of human dynamics than what most of the modern world, at least the modern developed world, experiences now. And I think there's a lot of vectors for control there. And technology, like the printing press, it was an absolute change in technology, especially for mimetics, right? Same thing is happening now, right? So technology is that genie in the bottle. It's too easy to decry as an ultimate positive, like the technocrats do, and it's also too easy to decry as an ultimate evil, as a lot of the religiously motivated anti-transhumanists are. Not that being anti-transhumanist isn't bad, right? Transhumanism itself kind of tells you what it is there.
Well, the answer, like everything, always lies in the middle, isn't it?
Yeah, and it seems trite. It seems like a trope. It seems so obvious that it doesn't need to be mentioned. Except just like when you tell yourself, you really shouldn't balance those three things, especially that one hot cup of tea. You take a risk. You do it, or you forget it. So yeah, that 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 sense of moderation, that sense of detachment from the ultimate consequences tied to your social reputation, for example, is a bit of wisdom we can get from the East, but it can be easily weaponized into, again, harnessing your ego or your agency to another's mast. And, they don't get to turn their ship very quickly, right? It's a Titanic. The whole idea of kyberneticos, right? Kybernetes, steersmen, directors. It's baked into us, right? It's a fractal expression of primate dynamics.
Yes, and I actually have a file here from Michael Hoffman's book, a screenshot that actually connects to what both you guys were just bringing up regarding the connection between all of this and technology. Let me see if I could pull it up really fast. And wow, they really changed the share screen on here already. Here it is. So this is from Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare by Michael Hoffman. And I mean, I just thought everything from around like here to here is like it just connects so well to what we're discussing. And I'll just read it really quick. So if we consider the hours in a day that most Americans spend in front of a TV and add to that the hours children spend immersed in the digital world of video and games, I mean, and this is all technology, and their forthcoming immersion in computer simulated worlds, which is already happening, of supposed history, travel in their schools, we see the gradual creation of a population of dwellers in perpetual illusion. Couple this with the increasing and very rapid destruction of wild nature and our ability to access it, and modern humanity becomes almost totally cut off from the voice of God, emerging as enslaved drone bees. And we just saw the order of the bees, in my opinion, at work in the whole Charlie Kirk thing. And this is why I think it was done in Utah, whose flag proudly displays the beehive. And this also brings up down here these video fun masters, and this are the social engineers, tastemakers, trendsetters, and agents of power and pleasure are not worried or anxious, just strutting and flitting wonderful, glorious gossamer creatures in the California beaches and the dance floors of Manhattan. Like they're psychopaths. They're psychopaths, and they're using the techno bros and the tech industry to create more and more Duper's delight and cause more and more confusion and engineer society. So it all connects.
There's something I find interesting as well. It used that really pretty operative word, that gossamer. And gossamer is that, it's that sort of light, airy spider web that gets, stuck around trees, and it's quite, it's something that's unique, I guess, to the South, right? Certain months of the year, and that they get it in the south of the USA. But we get it here as well. But it's interesting that they use that word, because it's almost like, within the system itself, all of the rhetoric that they use, all of the phraseology, it's all based around, in fact, a sort of economy of an economy of signs, an economy of symbols, right? They are conveying what they intend with their rhetoric. I don't know. Again, it probably is linked to Duper's delight in some way, but one example is the World Wide Web, or the internet, right? The net that enters, and that's not necessarily to say that the internet or the World Wide Web is completely bad, like what you're saying, Aurelius. It really is how you use it, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people, they just, I feel, with the younger generations, and this seems to show up in the statistics, I feel that they're really just, they're completely controlled, or the majority of them are controlled by what you would know as brain rot. They have other words for it, but brain rot content. You actually see it as well with there was a marked decrease in IQ IQ scores. I think it was, oh God, I forget the grade now, but there was a certain
Well, I know
yeah, there's a
under
certain
the
range
like
of
back in 2020, there was a bunch of papers that came out for like people under 30, and then I think it was even worse if they were under 20. But it was the amount of books read, the amount of words per conversation, the amount of relationships with opposite sex, everything just plummeted.
there was a range of grades as well. It was elementary grades, and they showed as well that there was usually it's around about 100 IQ, and it had dropped to 78 IQ during the pandemic years and afterwards. I don't think it's actually restabilized. I forget the range of grades now, but
well, if I'm remembering correctly, the amount of books read was about half a book per individual under 30, which is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And even when reading does happen, it isn't long form reading like many of the folks from our generations, I imagine, have become used to. And this isn't a new trend. If you were to spend a half hour with a cup of tea and look around the internet to look up what a student in 1880 would be expected to know upon graduating from public school, grade 8 essentially in North America, before entering their first year of high school, if they were to advance that far, you would be gobsmacked at the complexity of the language and the concepts they were expected to know, learn, understand, and be able to show you that they knew by writing with a pencil, and a paper, an exam. It made me feel stupid and unworthy because I couldn't do what some of those 8th grade kids could do. I couldn't do it easily. I'd have to train for it. It's shocking. And if you study power and politics, you can begin to see why so many people point to social engineers at the turn of the 20th century in North America, implementing the Prussian models that Johann Fichte and others developed to create what George Carlin, called obedient workers, who do not question too much and who do not think or dream or hope too much, and who are then malleable input units into the engines of economy of others. And this is not new. The technology of the time, cultural and material both, govern what these interactions look like. The mistake many of us make, and I'll hush after this, is that we are somehow in a special time or place or set of circumstances, when I think that old refrain from the Bible about there's nothing new under the sun, there's very little new under the hood of human sociodynamics.
I agree. Nothing really changes between human beings. And as I was mentioning in our discussion yesterday, that actually took a lot of the fun out of history for me. I was always really quite interested in history, military history, looking at ancient civilizations, and it basically destroyed it for me because you no longer had that detachment between the ancients and this, you would no longer look at them as this sort of mysterious, wondrous peoples that, had all of these marvelous ideas and they lived this life that was so remote from ours. And you actually realize nothing changes between the
They were
epochs.
cunts just like us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing I would say about to push back a little on the history thing is finding history that's been hidden. I still find to be somewhat interesting to find what actually happened in some of the past that we've been lied to about. Yeah, I mean, even though in the end, I guess the social engineering has worked the same regardless, no matter where we were at, because we wouldn't be in this situation if it didn't.
Oh, the situation is not new. No, just as we mentioned Markovian dynamics before, this happens with power structures in society. There is elite turnover. Sometimes there's elite overproduction. Those are areas of study that are fascinating. But our great I guess, sin as a civilization, or at least Westerners, is that we are somehow special. We believe this steady fantasy of progress that our official and our sources of history and sociology tell us about. And Silas, before I go on, I have a thought to complete there, going back to even something like the pyramids or Sacsayhuaman in Peru. Do you still have that tension with your love of history, or has it been repaired?
No, I still sort of have that. Yeah.
Hmm. That, I think, is similar to it's almost a kind of a gaslighting, because history is actually where we can gather a lot of useful intelligence from, operational intelligence. And one of the greatest lies that we have been told is about the linear development and the steadily progressive linear development of society since roughly the time of, I'll be very imprecise here, Babylon, right? Air quotes around Babylon, right?
Hmm.
Sumer, the land of two rivers, that whole area. We look at archaeological remnants like the Great Pyramids. We realize that the Sahara has been green and desert like and green and desert like through cycles of history. We look at the evidence of anomalous devices like the Antikythera mechanism, of megalithic architecture that we cannot recreate, and that if our history is true regarding tools of copper and softer metals, indicate that they could not have built those edifices with the tools they had access to. And yet, like the alpha monkey, right, staring you down so that you look away, we don't really question that much anymore. Why not? That is a priming for further uh, you know deferential glancing away from hard truths. I don't have any answers to provide other than that history, I think, is where we can gain a lot of strength from. Past behavior is a fantastic indication of future behavior.
Yeah, and
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
before you go on, Silas, I would say that I think there are a lot of people questioning it in certain communities, but it's just to once you get to university level where there's, and I guess the level that is actually controlling the narrative that teaches our children, that's where kind of all questioning is thrown out the window.
It's sort of weird now. And when I went into university, obviously I'm from the working class, so, and essentially I'm a tradesman from a construction background. So yeah, when I went into university, I was thinking, Jesus, I'm with the intellectual titans now. I'm gonna have to really try and knuckle down and to try and keep up. And yeah, like what you're saying, Aurelius, nowadays it's university isn't as it was in centuries gone by. Centuries gone by, you had to, I think in several, almost, if not all, British universities, you had to know Latin, ancient Greek, to a certain degree. Again, it is almost as a rite of passage, as a testament to just show your strong intellectual and I guess abstract thinking qualities, right? But that's not there anymore. It's not there at all. I think as well, every civilization goes through these various stages, and I covered it in my first book with the various 7 stages they were laid out by what was his name again? Glubb Pasha, Sir John Glubb, in his very short essay. I think it's about 24 pages, but I mean it's superb. It's called the Fate of Empires and the Search for Survival. Really fascinating short essay, and he basically lays out this 250-year cycle, and these civilizations go through 7 stages throughout. And each of these 7 stages, the purpose, I guess, of the civilization, the holy grail of what it means to be self-actualized within that civilization goes through these phasic changes. And right before the decline phase, you have the intellectual age, or the age of the intellect, I think Glubb called it. And it's interesting because when the decline phase comes about, and even when the collapse phase comes about, you actually find an almost inversion of that age of intellect, where the anti-intellectual, even the idiot, the fool, becomes championed in the civilization. And that's something you're seeing now as well. Now, the reason for that is because, of course, we have a nascent totalitarian system in place, and it's far more conducive to their power base, to maintaining their power, growing their power. If they have a proletarian that are effectively non-thinking and are cognitively impaired, even amongst, of course, the supposedly competent or professional classes. Again, for them, efficiency stems from power and how power perpetuates itself, not necessarily through sort of material or productive means. And I think that's something as well you're seeing with the new modern West, that we're beginning to move away. And funnily enough, you're seeing it with the likes of the deindustrialization and sustainability as well, where we're moving away from this sort of material, the material measurement of success, and we're moving to some sort of, again, a weird hyper reality where success is not measured by necessarily material means, or through cash or money or whatever it may be, or what we're producing, or productivity, but it's moving to this weird sort of what do you even call it? You have these weird quotas that change, week in and week out. You have the gender, I guess you would call it virtue, sort of virtue brownie points, but it's this sort of weird abstract,
or like
idea.
like virtue consensus.
Virtue consensus, brilliant. There you go, neologism right there. That's perfect. So it's this sort of virtue consensus. In fact, that's one way to describe it. Fundamentally, it's not based on production anymore. It's based on consensus, political consensus, which by the way is fascism. That's totalitarianism, where the state literally demands, by the force of the state's own will, that individuals have a spiritual and mental alignment with the state and what it demands. It's whims. So yeah, it's based around consensus. That's fundamentally what it's all about now. I mean, it's to the point now where they don't even care if there's a competency crisis. or a crisis. You have all of these complex systems. You need competent people to maintain them, and you're seeing a breakdown of it. But again, all that matters is that you have a consensus, and it's very cultish actually, because, well, for example, today in a university, what do you call her? She's like this sort of walking cliche of a left-wing, middle-aged Karen, right? This sort of lesbianic-looking, short-haired, opinionated individual, right?
Mhm.
And she's on her soapbox, and she's mentioning that it's absolutely shocking, the gender pay gap in the construction industry, and we have to change this. And the problem is these white middle-aged men just own, they have all of the major positions. And I was thinking, well, firstly, you're talking about a quota system. You're actually, you're not bringing into the equation that, of course, women, by and large, don't want to go into these management positions. They're quite stressful, and it's not necessarily something that all women find necessarily gratifying, right? A lot of men, by the way, don't find that stress and the responsibility incurred by that is gratifying either. A lot of them just do it for the money, right? Some of them do it for the power and prestige and status as well, right? But the majority of women clearly, by their own free choice, don't want to get into these positions. But what she's implying with this all is that the white middle-aged men are somehow, sort of institutional guardians, with the whip of racism and sexism and whatever other isms and phobias. They're using that to keep out those who do not look like them, and it's just so fundamentally absurd. It's so utterly absurd,
it
but she
is, and
believes that.
it reveals, however, a deep predisposition in human beings for tribalism and scapegoating, which we all know exists, and some cultures have formalized these elements of human dynamics into rituals. And what she is accepting for others, group blame, inheritance of sins, she certainly wouldn't accept for herself. But this reveals another very fundamental element of human psychology that most people find extremely difficult and even damaging, personally damaging to accept. And that is, we are status seeking, dominance, hierarchy, camping primates that enjoy the suffering of others secretly sometimes because they are not like us and we are not like them. Some of us really do believe this, and even if we acknowledge the shared fundamental humanity between us, an element of dissipating psychic tension when you have to submit to some other powerful force in your peer groups, you displace that tension by punching downward, just like orcs would, right? And it is that is the adversary so many religious systems speak about. Your own little sniveling grima worm tongue golem, selfish, shadow drenched little selfish monster child that wants me, mine, mine, mine. you know that's in all of us. We grow out of it, thank God, most of us. Some people can later revert to that basic framing and weaponize it, and most people don't accept that the same way you or I might look at a street drug addled, you know, mental health, someone with severely damaged mental health, a brain full of, damage from years of drug abuse, God knows what kind of personal and family failings and abuse on the street, in between the cracks. Even if that person had recovered, you probably wouldn't want them to marry your son or daughter, even if they turned their life around, because there's too much baggage. But in the midst of their drug addiction, you may look at them and actually just utterly dehumanize them. You look away. We all do it, right? Let's be honest. We all do it. The same way we look at those people, however, is how so-called elites look at us. But here's the crucial difference, at least for me. You and I, right? I imagine us, and Silas, you mentioned working class. We have enough of a connection, like a logarithmic function. We can still muster empathy for those people we see below us, but very few of these very upper echelon humans, by upper echelon I mean in social ranks, not their inherent worth of humanity, they can't muster anything that you and I would recognize as empathy. And a very few of them, I do firmly believe a very few of them are purposefully crafted or shaped to be that way, right? To be tough, to be proper inheritors of dynastic power. Does any of that make sense in terms of our looking down the nose at others and having access to empathy for them still? Role reversal?
Oh,
Absolutely. Go ahead, Silas.
oh no, sorry, man. You jump in.
Oh no, I was just gonna say absolutely, and I would even say that I would say the so-called everyone who's not considered the 1% class, we even have empathy for those above us sometimes when we shouldn't. And so, like, yeah, no, I totally agree.
It's something you always see as well with these various religions, be them secular or secular or divine, where you will always have that sort of penance mentality. It's obviously there's deep psychological reasons for it, but it clearly allows the potential for control. Because if you have this issue, if you create this artificial problem, right? The problem is, of course, the absolute absurdity of reframing the free choices of women in a specific field, right? It could be in anything. I mean, even engineering, because females don't want to do that job, right? It does. Again, it's not something that necessarily jives well or is compatible with the vast majority of.
With Silas, you could even say it doesn't necessarily even statistically match the population's like the division of male and female in the population. So there's no way that it would statistically play out in a way where there's an equal number of positions, say in a job opening, for instance. Because why? Like if you have a smaller population of a certain race or something, for instance, let's get into that. Then there's obviously going to be less of those workers in, when you extrapolate into certain job positions, because there's less of those people in a society. It doesn't even have to be based on anything else than that.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a multitude of factors, isn't there?
Yeah.
And none of that's taken into account. The implicit assumption is that there must be an issue. There must be evil at the heart of. There must be heresy, right? It's like the Inquisition. There must be evil at the heart of the believers, or they must be believers. They must be non-believers, infidels, merely masquerading as the progressive believers, of a new tomorrow, and all of these types of ideas, right? And what it establishes is it basically weaponizes empathy or morality.
Yes.
Against firstly against the people themselves, and then I think, like what you see throughout the various witch hunt crazes, the Inquisition, the heresy that was rooted out in both Christian and Muslim societies, these completely insane, hysterical eras of murder and mayhem, trying to root out the heresy. All of that's really based around, firstly, the need for the power base to maintain its power, right? Again, at the expense of the wider society. So it's like what we're in now. They don't really care if they create a competency crisis. They don't care if they have lower productivity. They don't care about any of the material concerns that we believe that they would be, concerned about. That's all out the window. All they care about is power and maintaining the perception of power. It's basically maintaining the thought form that legitimizes their entire illegitimate regime. That's all they care about. And it's like what you were saying, Aurelius, this is, of course, based around primate psychology, right? There's deep psychological reasons for all of this. They clearly understand our psychology to such a degree that they can reframe certain issues. They can even invent issues just entirely from thin air, right? Climate change is one of them, for example. And from that, they simply balloon problems. They create problems to thus drive changes of state, which turns our psychology into a pathology.
Yes, exactly. And dude, this is exactly like what you just brought up is exactly what I was mentioning to you yesterday regarding like that new Netflix show about Ed Gaines. It's I couldn't even get through one episode. It was basically a form of weaponized empathy for necrophilia, for necrophiliacs. You have this whole show based on someone who's digging up bodies, having intercourse with the bodies, and wearing the body's skins like suits. It was so just not there's nothing there. Like, there's a gory movie that at least there's action, like 28 years later, 28 days later, at least there's other stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
This was just trying to get you to see Ed Gaines as an empathetic figure who you could somehow relate to. It was so weird.
I think you see that as well with the whole map thing, the minor attracted
Yeah.
persons, and it's
Well, and notice
basically-
how they keep pushing it. Like it's like
Yeah.
it's keeps the first series. I remember the first monster series was about Jeffrey Dahmer. It wasn't too like I've seen worse stuff than that. And the second one wasn't even that bad with the Menendez brothers. Now you have this one where they're really, really pushing the necrophilia, the butchering of bodies, like, and same with the minor attracted persons, which they're pushing and pushing more and more as we go forward.
Call things what they are, not their aphorism. Not their euphemisms, right? And these soft terms, George Carlin called it. I forget what he called it. He had a whole comedy bit about soft language like that. World War I, shell shock is now post-traumatic stress disorder. Right?
Yeah.
This is an element in semiotic warfare that I call entropic English. Right? They're baking in a slow burn virus of untethering and unraveling the normal meanings and immediate mental framings that come into your mind from language. Right? Pedophile hits a hell of a lot different than minor attracted person.
Exactly.
But there is something to salvage from this, and this is an insight that is new to me, and it may sound asshole-ish, so forgive me, but when we think about psychopaths, we often decry them as, that's inhuman, and how could they, and that's monstrous. Yes, that's all true, but you know what else it is? It's also an element in the range of what it is to be human. Right? If you think about evolutionary time, I have no idea if either one of you is a creationist. I hope not, but if you are, forgive me if I insult you. Evolutionary time, tens and hundreds of thousands of years of swarm species of hominids, right? Now, this might seem like a strange non sequitur, but the first Marvel movie with the Hulk, where he grabbed Loki and smashed him all over the ground, puny god, right? Tony Stark, we have a Hulk. Think about a tribe, a small group, or even a clan who have psychopathic warriors to unleash on enemy combatants, to butcher them, to wear their skins, to put the fear of the gods in them. That is a nuclear weapon when you don't have metal technology, right? It serves an evolutionarily advantageous, it is evolutionarily advantageous to the tribe if the leadership structure can control those nuclear weapons. But of course, right, the virus got out of the bottle, the genie got out. But here's where we make a fundamental mistake. We think that psychopaths like that are inhuman or somehow other than human. They're alien. They're not. It's an older version of us.
Yeah.
Well, Aurelius, this is why I think I see such a difference between, because I just watched both things, or I tried to watch Monster, the Ed Gaines, or tried to watch an episode of that, the Ed Gaines story yesterday, and instead I watched 28 Years Later, which I hadn't seen yet. And now in 28 Years Later, you have people acting in certain ways, just as you described. They actually they call some of the survivors berserkers because of the way they're behaving. They call some of the zombies berserkers because of the way they behave. But you see this sort of evolutionary state happening in the 28 Years Later movie in order for these people to survive with whatever this rage virus that's creating these inhuman zombies is. They have to adapt. The people have to adapt in society. But with the Ed Gaines thing, I don't know if that's a natural state. I almost tend to think a lot of the so-called serial murder we've seen was induced by some sort of time in military operations, clandestine programs, and then the story is ultimately stretched and it's made to be something it wasn't, because I know the Ed Gain story isn't what they were even showing at all to people in the first episode. Like, they were totally making shit up. So then you're getting like a depiction of a psychopath that isn't even something that should be naturally present. It's like it's a construct, if that makes sense.
I think that's an element of it, but I would just caution you, and I'm a stranger to you, so take this for what it's worth, but I would just caution you from just wholesale unpinning the tail from one donkey and just totally pinning it on the other. Just
Yeah,
get the
yeah.
options given to you, and realize that, of course, there may be some truly bizarrely alien, fundamentally broken and irrecoverable people, right? That psychopathy may have worsened, and if we consider the number of stress points
Yeah.
and opportunities, not opportunities, vectors for dissociation to happen in the modern world, is it any wonder that we now have weapons grade psychopaths compared to what we had in the past? Right?
Yeah. And to your point, even if it's not naturally happening and that construct is happening, it's still happening. Like, there are still people being somehow turned into these monsters, so it does still exist. Yeah.
But here's something horrifying to consider. And again, this is like looking in your own heart and realizing, my God, I actually do dehumanize other people. I don't like me when I realize that about myself. There are some people who understand that money is not power, right? That power is power, whatever that means to you. I can't tell you what that's supposed to mean. But when you feel it, right, you'll know it.
Hmm.
When you feel angry enough that you almost kill someone in a fit of rage, and you realize it was just a fantasy in your mind, you realize that you have a Hulk inside you that should frighten you. This is a fundamental element of the human condition. We like to pretend it doesn't exist, right? Everyone shits.
Yeah.
Everyone is
Yeah.
capable of murder. All of the stories from our mythopoeic past tell us this. It's in us. And if it wasn't in us, we wouldn't be here to tell about it. What the hell was I going to say about this? But psychopaths, especially those who wield power, and those who realize, or maybe come to believe, if their realization, I shouldn't say they realize because that could impute I believe it. If they come to a realization that there's only matter and there's no survival after death, I have no idea if there is or not. But if they're staunchly materialist, they may justify anything in the material world, and power begets power. And if they want worthy inheritors, because despite any psychopathy or powerless they have, they're almost certainly likely to have baseline instincts for procreation, to leave some kind of genetic or intellectual legacy in the future. And they want worthy heirs to whatever they have amassed during their time alive. And if they can still dominate through their heirs somehow, it's a double victory. And many of them will purposefully condition their children to have stunted empathy so that they can do, quote, what needs to be done, unquote. Right? If you've ever, let's say, here's a common example for anyone. If you've ever given someone the silent treatment, right, punitively, and then you realize that it's been enough time, but you still give it maybe one more day just because fuck them, you understand, because you'll be harder and less easy to hurt in the future, right? People do that to their children so they can inherit positions of power, because God help us, when those people also arrogate to themselves the status of kingship or emperorship or agentic empire, all of us suffer. It is the self-righteousness of totalitarianism, right? That's, we decry it as wokeness, right? That smug right side of history feeling. For a few, it's naked power, but for sometimes even the worst among us, it's from a deluded sense of self-righteousness, right? A bizarre projection of their faults onto the masses, and to whip the masses to purge themselves of their faults. It's another fundamental aspect of humanity, and it happens at scale, and we cast our eyes down.
They are certainly the I guess the wild men, you would call them, right? And I think the term you were looking for, if the George Carlin thing, was concealed reality. This is the language of concealed reality. And I think as well, that's something that they constantly attempt to input and to introduce into society, so that it takes root and it takes effect, which is this sort of not just the concealed reality of the language, but the concealed reality of almost the cognition and the thought forms that they bring. Again, religion, political ideology. We were talking about it there. This sort of um, self-flagellating climate cult, right, or sustainability cult, or the virtue cult, essentially. So all of this is essentially to ensure that we do not become them, which is they are essentially they have tapped into their atavistic core, to their primal power, right? Like what you're saying, they've become the wild men. And another thing you see throughout the nobility, and it still occurs here in the royal family, probably less so now, but it still does go on amongst the sort of nobility and the peerage and the royal family, with the blood. I think they call it the blooded ritual. So they'll go on their first hunt with their father, who is the nobleman. This is the noble in training, I guess, right? His son, and then they'll kill a deer, or they'll wound a deer. The noble in training, the son, will be handed a knife to obviously dispatch it, finish the job, and then they will smear the blood over themselves, right? And they again, it's to sort of inculcate an atavistic moment in them. And atavism just means that you revert back to a sort of primordial state. It's probably where the whole werewolf or wereboar or this were monster concept came from. Even vampirism is a similar idea, toying with this, the vampire, which is this sort of frenzied, insatiable creature that is firstly an absolute monstrous killer, a predator, but also can be this sort of very persuasive individual. Again, that's probably touching upon the nobility, the wild man nature of the nobility.
If you think about it, it is appetite purely expressed. We mentioned the other day, coming to after being blacked out or so on, and just having just a hypersecond of existence is just pure egoless awareness, knowing that you're in a skin, you're seeing light, you're hearing sounds, you're in a body, but not knowing who you are, what you are. It's a very hard thing to describe. It's happened to me, I think, twice in my life. I want to say once, but maybe twice. And that's just a raw, unmediated awareness. I'll say this is very imprecise language, forgive me, but I think what you talk about there in terms of the vampire and the werewolf, that primal instinct, that's just pure appetite existing. It's the opposite of post nut clarity, right? It's pre nut appetite. If you think about it as a man, if you've ever been in that hump mode, right, and you can do amazing things when you're motivated, but it is just a primal expression. And so-called nobles or aristocrats, right? Just like in Dune, they have passed certain tests whereby they channel that feral primal behavior into tools of civilization and expression and acceptable limits. The art of Canley in Dune, for example. Noblemen understand that, right? They elevate their society, right? Not their civilization, but their society, their peer groups, their kinds of kind, as it were, right? Within the billions of tribal members of their common species. They elevate themselves into a society of ritual and rules and commonality. It's a culture within a culture. But they can only really be effective as they can only have a satisfactory amount of agency by trading a little bit of it away, but acknowledging to one another that we're all capable of this and we all know what it means if we break the rules. Dune is a fantastic example of this. There is so much layered and embedded in that novel.
Yeah.
Something. Yeah. Jump in, Chris.
Go ahead, Silas. Go ahead.
No, please.
The only thing I was gonna bring up was, I mean, it's interesting how these vampiric, and not because I think vampirism and the vampire is almost better than the Wolfman at this point because of just the ability to glamour, which technology has also helped the social engineers achieve. But it's interesting seeing them transform. I mean, and I don't even know if this is a transformation. It almost seems like this was always the case. They were always transhumanists. They were always, I mean, now they're calling themselves post-humanists. They were always have thought of themselves as gods. But I guess the transhumanism, post-humanism aspect of their sort of belief system comes into play more now because of technology.
Yeah, the technology is almost magnifying it tenfold, whatever they believe and think. I mean, even if you look into Kabbalah, and this touches upon something you were mentioning earlier, Aurelius, is that Kabbalah actually has no conception of an afterlife. There is no... Traditionally in Judaism, earlier in Judaism's development, there was an idea of the afterlife. However, with Kabbalah, there is really no conception of the afterlife.
Right when you said that, I opened to a page in Hoffman's book that says this: Kabbalistic tikkun olam, or repair of the world. That's what they have, basically. They have this idea of repairing the world which they obviously destroy through Ordo Abkeo, or what's the other one? Why am I forgetting the other version of Order Abkeo? You know the phrase I'm missing here. The alchemical phrase.
Oh yeah,
as above, so below.
No.
Negredo putrefatio.
Yeah. So I mean, they destroy the world to recreate it and to fix it. That's their belief.
That's somewhat inaccurate, right? Tikkun olam is not that. There's an inversion of tikkun olam that can be that. Now you're treading into an area called antinomianism, and it's not specific or limited to Judaism or Abrahamic faith systems. But most people know about this because of the context of so much weaponized discourse about Jews, Judaism, Zionism, political Zionism, right? Schofield Bible, Christian Zionism. It's such a can of worms. But Tikkun Olam itself, think of it as I'm not a practitioner. It's not my culture or background. I'm not advocating for it. I'm explicating. Tikkun Olam means repairing the world through doing good deeds. But if you are an antinomian, and antinomianism expresses itself in a few sects of Judaism as Frankism or Sabbatinism or as Lurianic Kabbalah, right? You practice something called salvation through sin. The idea being that the greatest and most weighty bits of tikkun olam, the crystallizations of God that were shattered and scattered to the corners of dimensionality,
the God sparks, right?
Yeah. In order to be able to touch or wield or carry the most precious, heaviest ones of those, you have to be worthy. And in order to know true good, you have to know what also it is to be truly evil. So you can experience it. It's a bizarre kind of inversion of what Tikkun Olam is, portrayed to be. This is not a blanket statement, but it is a nuanced kind of inversionism of that philosophy. It's a left-hand path, as it were.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because there are people who practice that, I'm sure, in a way that it should be practiced. And it definitely is an inverted way of viewing that phrase. But it is the way some people in these elite families seem to view things.
It goes to Zervanism, Silas. We were talking about the other day. In order to be the person who people turn to for synthesis, what better way to maintain that flow of energetics towards you, right, which is now your caloric intake, symbolically speaking, than to manufacture markets and then to monopolize those markets? It's bloody elementary.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to acknowledge it as such.
This is also something that's been, alleged of late stage capitalism, right? Even the whole climate thing is essentially it's inventing a new market. It's inventing a new economic vehicle by again. It's not necessarily to produce profit. It's to produce engagement.
It's to arbitrage
really.
transactions, right? The more money velocity, the more velocity of energy goes on, the more settlement methods
Exactly.
you can layer on top of it to extract, to harvest, to get your beak wet, right? It's an extraction racket.
But the velocity as well is almost like that is a way in what, like you I think hit the nail right on the head with the velocity, the energy. So it's essentially engagement. What they're farming is engagement. Think of it like, I don't know, any sort of video game, right? An MMO or even Monopoly, right? And I've used this analogy before. And essentially, if you've monopolized the entire board, right, and I don't know, there's maybe one or two winning players and the rest are losers, right? Again, you can only maintain your winning status within this game if you maintain the losing players in that game. So you persuade them or coerce them or by whatever means to continue to go round the board, right? To continue to essentially validate your winning status. So another example is, of course, an MMO. An MMO is a completely worthless pastime, right? And I say that from a person that's played MMOs before, right? Even video games. But MMOs is that's massive multiplayer online games, completely worthless because ultimately, your progress in that game and the amount of hours you've invested in it only exists for as long as the servers exist. But the idea of the MMO, the way in which it controls you, is it continues to create new events, which draws in your engagement, draws in your attention. Again, engagement farming. And it maintains the sort of illusory nature of the worthwhileness of this otherwise worthless and completely asinine pastime. Now, it's the same thing with societies, and I think that's another reason for it. Absolutely, you're correct. It's just simply a way to maintain the momentum of the chariot. We're talking about the Markaba and that, yeah.
Silas, I sent you a slide
Mhm.
titled "Dopamine is a Currency in the Economy of Control." Can you fire it off to Chris and maybe consider sharing it on the screen if you think?
Or if either of you want to pull it up, I could share either of your screens.
I can send it to you now, Chris.
There's actually two, and then there was a text slide. You can have a look at that. I shared a GPT interaction before, and you mentioned gaming. It's odd that you mentioned that because I did a GPT dive today into attention economics as a form of grinding for XP in vaporware markets. That it's like EVE Online, right? That space thing. Real life has become that for some people, right?
Did you just share it with me, Silas?
Yeah, I've sent it on a Telegram.
Is it here? Let me see. Is it this one?
It's tan with red edges. It's purposefully designed to be schizoid. It's a bit of graphic art.
Oh, okay. I see it now. Pull it in.
There's no foulness or anything, wonky like that.
Share screen. And like I said, if either of you guys want to share a screen at any point, just let me know and I'll share your guys' screen. But this is the one, right? Is this it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay. There we go.
It's not meant to be read in any particular order, wherever your eyes fall, right? You don't have to waste screen or show time with it, but it's related to what we're chatting about.
Yeah. And there are a few Silas sent me. I'm not sure if you wanted me to share the other ones too.
You go ahead if you want to share any of them. They're out there for people to share with those who they trust or believe it's worth looking at. Nothing is proprietary.
Let me stop this one.
There's also something interesting to mention regarding dopamine as a currency of control, and it's with the sort of short form content. What we're seeing is, I believe it's called the hedonic threshold, which is basically the pleasure threshold that one must reach in terms of whatever it is that they're doing, in which it sort of initiates the production of dopamine, right? Within the centers in their brain. So what's interesting about that is that dopamine has almost become it's a lot of people have become dopamine junkies, yes, but they've become almost what would the word be, desensitized. They've become desensitized to the dopamine, and their hedonic threshold is all over the place. So essentially, of course, video games work on this sort of hijacking of the reward response of dopamine. And of course, the gamification of life is beginning to hijack it in a way, right? You've posited it there. The grind is simulated purpose. That's also touched upon, funnily enough, by Ted Kaczynski in his book. I forget now that manifesto. I mean, the guy, of course, is an absolute crackpot. He's crazed, obviously, a crazed killer. But that book touches upon certain clearly, well, it predicts certain clearly visible things, right? One of the things it touches upon is this simulated purpose idea, right? With the sort of post-industrialized society. You're going to begin to get that simulated purpose. You'll get people that are doing completely what would be considered totally worthless pastimes, but they'll do them routinely, habitually. It'll almost become like a religion to them, a way to keep them stimulated, right? It's like a hamster on the hamster wheel. They just run it. They don't know why they do it. They just simply do it because it keeps them, in motion. It keeps them anchored to the world in some weird, I guess, postmodern way, right? What's your opinions upon that? Why are they desensitizing people to dopamine?
I don't think they're desensitizing people to it.
Mm.
I think they're trying to entrain more people to respond to dopaminergic hits through various easy pleasures. This also has an analog in your personal, everyone's personal existence, almost everyone's personal existence. You hear about married couples, for example, in their third or fourth or fifth decade of marriage, sometimes being into really freaky stuff. So older people need more hot sauce on their wings because their taste buds are dying, right? Or what used to tickle their fancy doesn't work anymore. The same thing happens for a lot of people, I think, because it's part of a standardization process. If you can dissolve everyone into a morass of economic units that can be easily stimulated in new ways simply by salting chicken feed down that they'll peck for. You just reward them for the pecking, and it doesn't matter what you throw down, they're going to peck at it, right? That is the dopaminergic, it's a hard word to say, loop, right? The short attention economic loop that we're often kind of faced with. I'm addicted to social media for much of the week until I put it away. Thank God I've done that with a phone. Pretty soon it's going to have to be the computer. But we all feel this tension. And it's related to our earliest childhoods in formalized education. Participation trophies, a gold star, a silver star, a bronze star. You tried, little Billy, but Susie got the gold star for best this or that. Because Susie realized early on, or Jimmy or whoever, it doesn't have to be a girl, realized that if they sucked up a bit and cast their gaze down and followed the entrainment lead of the teacher, there is energy to be harvested there. Energy just to stand in reward. I don't mean, you know, archons and sucking energy and loosh or anything like that. That's all theoretical stuff for fireside chats. But that little child learns how to manipulate the adults around them, and they're allowed to think that they're manipulating the adults around them some of the time. Once the adults, who have much more acumen, realize that child knows what a lie is and how to do it, that's when a whole new level of training kicks in, where you begin entraining people, right, with false lures, things you know are inherently valueless in any real economy that you yourself understand. And like a an emanation of the world, to use that again, I'm coming back to these terms, but it's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, right? That adult doesn't realize that their own agentic incentive structures are similarly manufactured, except they don't have the wonder and innocence and pure sight of a child anymore to see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. It seems also like, I mean, if you consider what Mr. Rioso just said, how dopamine deficiency, or I'm sure dopamine overload, can both probably lead to a variety of various health conditions. It seems like this is a form of dysgenics that is being, like, it's a way of them, participating in dysgenics.
That weird Stephen King movie with Kathy Bates, where she crippled the guy in the bed to keep him around to write.
Oh, Misery.
That's dysgenics, right?
Yeah.
At a civilizational scale, that's the same thing.
Yeah.
I need you to need me, so I'm going to Munchausen by proxy you into into permanent abuse and gaslight you about it. It's fucking
Yeah.
vampirism.
Yeah. Turn everyone into addicts, basically.
Yeah,
Of course. I'm so sorry. Just, I don't want anyone now listening to this to think, we heard all this before. This is the detection phase of things, the discernment phase of things. I still need guidance in coming to a resolution phase of things. That's the real work, right? This part is easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of how to actually fix this situation. Yeah, it's. I think as well there's almost, you brought up yesterday this speciation, and or we could call it the bifurcation of the species, right? There appears to be something really peculiar going on. I'm starting to see it in Gen Alpha and Generation Z. Technically, I'm actually part of Generation Z. I think I'm right on the cutoff point or whatever, but Generation Z, younger Generation Z and Generation Alpha, on videos regarding the sort of educational, the lackluster educational achievement of Generation Alpha, and their sort of abysmal IQ rates, developmental rates, and things like that, and even, of course, some of the horror stories from teachers. What you're starting to see is there's like this massive chasm between those who have parents that don't necessarily allow them as much screen time. So they are now, they're not essentially dopamine junkies, right? They're not desensitized in terms of that pleasure response, and it's not hijacked by this sort of short form content and the doom scrolling. And they will read books. So books are great because they tend to sort of incrementally release that dopamine, depending on what you're reading, of course, right? And so they're not malformed, they're not maladapted individuals like their peer group, the other side of the aisle. But you're actually starting to see that there's like this chasmic divide between the two, and I wonder if the if the technological state continues unabated, right, for I don't know another 100 years or so. I'm not saying it will. It may actually, you may go through a systems collapse, but let's just assume that it did, right? It went on for another century or two, and this sort of linear trajectory of this chasmic divide between those who you know, they're not necessarily completely taken over and possessed by the technology, by the Promethean spirit, and those who become basically the sort of proletariat, unthinking masses. It makes you wonder, will there actually be, speciation, not necessarily biologically speaking, but, a sort of bifurcation of the species in terms of their mind, right? In terms of their spiritual or psycho-spiritual quality, right? That there's these two, these sort of two bifurcated groups will be so completely alien to one another that they will be almost two different species, right? Again, not necessarily biologically, but
A
perhaps
moment,
mentally.
Silas.
And yeah,
This is an element, I think, in the plot of things, because to believe, this ties back to this: we have a Hulk, right? We have a psychopath. To believe, for us to be willing to believe that that difference, right, in capacity can at that point in history be used to justify dehumanizing other people, that is a silken blade, right, being introduced. It is an assassination tool, because we think, like, look at that guy who shot collared his dog on his stream, that radical, not even radical, actually, I
Hassan
should say.
Piker, yeah.
Yeah, him, right? He, Look at the outpouring that people have for that dog, right? Rightly so. I love dogs, right? But for him to do that, for him to be able to do that, speaks of, it's a meat object to him, right? It's not something with sentience, with feelings that deserve consideration. Now, we don't allow people with Down syndrome to be treated like that, right? We at least claim at a social and societal level to believe that that is wrong, fundamentally wrong. IQ does not capture your humanity, right? Children exist in this state we're talking about because, and of course, we give them lots of terrain to be vouchsafed consideration because they're just children. Notice how that when we see other able-bodied adults, we say able-bodied adult, we don't give them that charity anymore, right? Of course, we need to have standards, but if we accept that our descendants, right, in large part will be like idiocracy people. It's kind of what they're bringing about. If we then choose that as the permissible line to dehumanize them, we're accepting that to happen to us as well. This is part of, I think, the poison framing they're bringing about. Yes, there's going to be a speciation. Of course, it happens all the time. But we have a fundamental connection in our humanity. And, sure, that sounds wonderful, but we can now expand that, not just to the fundamental deservedness of consideration for human beings, but for sapiosentience, right? A dog is sentient, but it's not sapient like we are. We still accord it rights. It can't be abused, right? We can't accept a watering down of that common humanity, even if we are vastly different in our capacities. The substrate has to remain firewalled. It has to be remain holy, as it were, in the purest sense of that word. And let me just finish with, I don't believe you, of course not, you were not indicating that. I just want people to realize this is a trap embedded in this framing being prepared for us. It's another element of dysgenics, right? Severing you from what it means to be human or to deserve consideration, moral weight. We can't accept an erosion of that.
There's something else I wanted to ask you about as well. And this sort of, I actually made a note of it. It was from last night's chat. Sorry, I'm going through the notes here. I'm trying to find it. I made a lot of notes. Oh yes, right. So regarding Dune, and just on that topic of speciation and things like that, I don't know if you're familiar with Frank Herbert's son wrote several other lore books to Dune, and it goes into the Butlerian jihad and basically the war against the thinking machines. And firstly, first question is that do you see human beings eventually becoming lost in their own machines? What do you think is the psychological reasoning behind that? Right? Again, not even tying into power. What's the pathology behind man and his need to almost manipulate the fundamental principles of nature to his own ends, to exert his own will over nature herself as well? And moreover as well, this idea of the spice, you posted something, a sort of meme.
Yeah,
He who controls the spice
compliance is the
controls the
spice.
universe. Yes, exactly. Yeah, if you have any comments upon that.
I think it speaks for itself. It's meant to be an imprecise communication. It's showing rather than telling, right? So, sometimes you can tell someone something, they get it, it's great, it's a high degree of accord. Other times, I can't see the constellation of emotions and meaning attachments and history and relationship pings on the guitar strings of your heart that come up from sharing the idea that compliance is the spice. And if you know what the spice is, that makes sense to you. And the spice must flow. If we need a crass invocation still connected to Dune, there's an expression in Dune that Herbert relates, right? Control the coinage and the courts, let the rabble have the rest. So says the Emperor Shaddam, Muga Muga, whatever his number is. Well, that echoes a genuine quote from history, I think from Amschel Rothschild, who said, I care not who makes the laws of a nation so long as I control its coinage or its money system. Or what he meant was, if I ultimately control the incentive structures, right? If I get to control what counts and who counts what counts, I don't care what laws you make because you are downstream of me. So why do we want it? That's a good question. I don't know. I think we all want to return to childhood. But control, I'm sorry, spice, right, is compliance. Compliance is the spice. None of these systems work without us, as our primate nature indicates, right? Like a dog salivating to a bell, our primate nature indicates subservience to an alpha, right? It's literally hundreds of thousands of years of human and proto-human evolution overtop many millions of years of primate dynamics, all involving the same chemistry and the same semi-symbolic understanding of the world. And when you add time and awareness of mortality into this, things blow up in a fractal bubble I can't begin to describe. But yes, ultimately, compliance is the spice. Think, gentlemen, I'm in Canada. If the Americans and the Canadians and the British, right, the regular citizens born and raised here, descendants of families from thousands of years of habitation on the land, newcomers with their fresh citizenship, utterances behind them just yesterday, the people of your nation, right, who genuinely care about, Western civilizational values, right, in the broadest sense of what that means, right? I don't want to quibble about every element. Broadly Western values, right? If we decided we're not paying any more taxes because it's illegitimate, everything is illegitimate. The entire crown system that the West runs on is fraud ab initio. If we could organize that, there's the problem. That is the compliance. We interrupt those compliance feeds, they can't carry on. They don't get high grade octane, right? Gasoline for their engines. But we comply because we have Sonderkommandos among us, right? Those within the prison who take special privileges from the owners of the prison. But the prison is made from us. And I don't have the solution. I can just discern more patterns so I can help people realize, oh shit, this is another lie, and here's why. We all know what needs to be done. Withdraw compliance and act with grace thereafter. We aren't the aggressors. That's my rambling reply. Compliance is the spice. Make sense?
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Compliance is the mainstay goal. In fact, that's the goal of any economic machine as well. We were discussing, economy, obviously from the Greek, for household management, effectively. It's the same idea. It's you're utilizing the distribution of resources, again, not to maintain the system itself, right? Not to maintain your vision of the system in a tangible or material way, but it's to maintain the compliance. That's what it's all about. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely staggering. But it's like what you're saying. By us actually discerning these patterns and building a picture in our minds, of basically how they're accomplishing this. What are the appendages of the system? What are the limbs of power? That you're actually disentangling yourself from the whole, confusing mess of it all. In a way, I think the only way out of this system is to probably create a parabiotic system, to create literally a parallel system. But even that, you're still getting into the issue of Dunbar's number and things like that, like what you're stating. And this idea, once you reach a certain threshold of a population within a given society, do these patterns just replay themselves? Regarding what you're saying, uh, we have to presume that they would, right? Because this is innate, evolutionary primate,
Yes.
I guess, social organization. So, yeah, it's
Think,
fascinating.
imagine yourself as a David Attenborough alien, an alien like David Attenborough, come to study the wildlife of Earth, right? They look at Gila monsters, they look at lizards, they look at bonobos, they look at whales, they look at butterflies, they look at hive insect creatures. And as systems analysts, they basically break down like Spock would, right? The
Hmm.
components of these systems of energy, economics, and life forms. And they can draw some parallels, and they may note there are phase changes where whole new domains of problem solving become possible, right? Breathing oxygen, having opposable thumbs is the big one, right? And then the feedback loops that all these changes create. So literally, there's like going from 1D to 2D, and if you know the 2D flatlander to 3D paradigm shift in your mind, oh my God, I can kind of picture what it would be like to be 2D seeing. That's fucking weird. Now, apply that orthogonally to things like understanding cause and effect, social structures. Now, have that David Attenborough alien come and look at humans, right? They would just note some of the almost fundamentally identical substrate operating with mere cosmetic differences. But those cosmetic differences are of such a magnitude, we can express them by saying chimpanzees have 2% different DNA than we do. Look at all the difference that allows. And then you look at our 23 chromosomes, and apparently a pair of them were fused in ways that boggle the mind. I can't explain that, but a lot of people will try and sell you something about it. You begin realizing that, you know, we talk about Markovian dynamics and phase change. We barely understand the magnitudes of change that go on here. I don't remember what it's like to think like a child, but through teaching some kids, I've recaptured some of their ability to perceive truths immediately, and it's a wonderment to me. Right? I've gained so much though. So a part of my nature has been forever transformed, crystallized into an adult form now, with the barest kind of perception of what it was like to be before as a child. But that's okay. I don't live in a child's world, right? It's not mostly a child's world, but that difference, that missing element of you opened up a void for so much else to grow in fractally, right? Now think about the people who prey on us, right? Our own natural predators. They kill a part of themselves in bonding rituals or dissociation identity rituals, or through a lifetime of actual just brutal trauma and shaping. They kill that part of themselves to then be able to do the atrocious things they do for power. Is it such a stretch to imagine that that's how this is happening? I can't imagine what that would be like any more than I can imagine what it's like to really think and see the world like a child. I can't honestly say I could relate that to you. I have a vague apperception of it, but it's outside my draw distance. That's okay, but I can't pretend it doesn't exist, and it can't be a vector for my abuse, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a niche in the marketplace, right? Agents in the market will respond to the opportunities available to them. That's a simple a caveat across every energy system. Sorry for the preachy bit.
No. I'm just thinking upon that. It almost appears to be as well that, for example, see what we see with the technology today. And sorry if this is going on a bit of a tangent, but it's sort of touching upon things you've been bringing up regarding this. You know, the sort of loss of innocence. I think that human beings are attempting to reclaim as well. And it's not just innocence, but you know, when you're going through your childhood and adolescence, there's less incurring of stress or responsibility, but it's not necessarily that. It's you know, you're getting locked into the sort of jarring, impersonal nature of the system as well. And it almost appears that again, it's like this inversion, this judo move, right, where the momentum of our desires is being used against us on a deeply um, a deeply perfidious level, right? So people want innocence. They want to, you know, leave their responsibilities behind, if you will. They want to, I guess, you know, go back to the golden age, right? Go back to the dawn age. This is something you find in mythology too, right? And I think you see it, for example, within Homer's Odyssey, the Lotus Eaters, right? This mindlessness, there's almost like a salvation in the mindlessness of it all. Again, people wanting to go back to their childhood, right? To reclaim the innocence that was lost. And along the way, of course, they sort of subjugate themselves to a being, or you know, a committee of beings who want to use that for their own ends, right? Again, to gain compliance over them. In a similar sense, you see the same thing with technology. Most people, you know, I've never truly understood why. You know, people who have access to the internet, they literally have access to, you know, vast amounts of information, pretty much all information that you know, for the past 600 years or so, right? It's all contained on the internet. If you simply just search for it, some of it's quite well hidden now with Google and all of this and the dead internet theory, but it's still there somewhere if you search for it hard enough. And you know, they'll just simply watch cat videos, or you know, they'll watch brain rot content, right? And I think as well, I think man, actually, there's something fundamental in man, and I think this probably, I'm answering my own question I asked you as well, with why are we falling into our own machines? And I think the fundamental answer to it is because we want to. I think man's greatest advantage is his mind, is his ability for abstraction. But as we see with civilizations, as they tend to age and, you know, proceed in their years and in their life cycle, they become more and more drunk on abstraction. And, you know, they have to go through the sort of mental gymnastics of trying to maintain all of these abstractions, this sort of labyrinthian complex of abstractions that forms the basis of, you know, the sort of social and cultural system that they're completely tied to the mast of. So I think there's a deep yearning in man to almost return to a primordial past. I mean, it really is. It's almost like a childlike innocence they would want to return back to. And I think that's what man is constantly trying to reclaim, even both in spiritual practice as well with well, I mean, this is where spiritual practice and even scientific or intellectual pursuit sort of they cohabit a space here. There's a intersectional space. They cohabit here. I think that's the basis of it. I think we're all searching for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is this, that we basically return back to what civilization tried to transport us away from. I think that's fun. And of course, power is using that. Power's leveraging that. It's using it to control us.
Yeah.
You're right about that. I was immediately brought to mind of two things: a return to Eden, and that has a left hand and a right hand path to it. I'll get into that in just a second. A return to Eden in combination with a shadow biome. You've heard of talk about a shadow biome being on Earth, yes? Are you
Mhm.
vaguely familiar with the concept?
Shadow biome? No, I'm not actually.
The idea that there is some microscopic life that may not be of the left or right hand chirality we are, that it's not exactly antimatter, but it's forms of life on Earth in deep vents or in deep layers of the Earth that may exist in environments that we don't normally recognize as
Oh,
harboring life.
extremophiles.
That's extremophiles. And extremophiles just may be the only forms of shadow biome we can actually see. We may
Oh, I
not be able to
see, right.
see the other ones. Again, that's very fuzzy. Please don't hold me to that definition. Just after the fact, this may make some sense. A shadow biome. So a return to Eden can be two things, right? If you think about the Matrix, where the agent was chatting with the guy eating that bloody piece of beef, and the guy said, "Just, I just want to go back to sleep. I just want to forget everything. If I can pretend that I'm eating beef while I'm eating bugs, that works for me. I'm tired, right? I just want to sit on the sofa and eat Cheetos and get fat, right? I want to be one of Yuval Harari's useless eaters. I'm good with that." So you're telling me you want to be a slave? Yes, that's your last and final wish, really? Yes. Oh, okay. You can be a slave. Boom. Return to Eden, because the Eden for that shadow biome predator is keeping sheep, right? You want to be a sheep?
Mhm.
Fucking great. I want to keep sheep. You'll know nothing of death until my blade is upon thee. That's a shadow biome with a return to Eden. Some people want to be fucking slaves. Most people don't want to be slaves, but they're not going to challenge the alpha. So we do everything we can to salve that horror. So much so that we don't recognize it as horror. I can barely understand how fucking horrible it is. Like true screaming into the void horror. I'm willing to prostitute myself and submit because of biology and conditioning and fear. And because I don't want to lose the things that give me comfort. For whatever reason, I'm not attaching a value judgment to that. That's the state of most humans. And that's what we run from. And that's why we can have talks like this, and likely will for a few more years, until maybe it's almost too late, until we really do constructive, legal, healthy, consent withholding things to make our numbers have force. But that's so easy for me as some strange asshole on the internet to say.
Yeah.
But if you've ever spent a moment looking in a mirror and losing your identity, wondering, who am I? What is really looking back at me? It just lasts an instant. I couldn't describe the time to you, right? What is that? Who is that? Who gets to decide that? Who feeds on that? Agents in the market respond to the opportunities available to them. And if
Yeah.
they can convince you that you're getting a better end of the deal, well, really they are. The world is carnies and rubes. At least that's a framing that is often used.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you jump in, Chris. Sorry.
Oh, good. I was just gonna also add that. I mean, I think we see this playing out with the bouncing back from like a mommy state, like a communistic sort of state, to a daddy state, to a more authoritarian, protect me, make it a security type state. And they use, like, that's just another example of how this sort of thing is weaponized. They put you into a perpetual sort of adolescence to where you want to go back to childhood and to the extreme, or they make you really, really like hate that sort of view, but at the same time, their alternative is now you're part of the authoritarian mechanism that's bashing the shit out of people that shouldn't be getting the shit bashed out of them, basically.
Let me give you just a horrible to imagine eye bleach worthy example of that, right? Now you've got to scale this from individual behavior to a civilizational behavior. And I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just giving you a couple of examples so that you can kind of see why some people would see, I can see there's a connection, or I can see there's a little bit of this and that, all right? Is it called adult baby diaper play, where people revert and they want their partner to change their like some people want that. I can't imagine wanting that,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And if it's consenting people, fuck, go to town, be happy. But that's, to me, that's weird. I don't want that. Some people want that. Some people want to be hurt. I mean, really hurt, right? So these expressions of humanity exist not only on in a personal scale, but think about it's an equivalent of a metabolic disease for a civilization, right? I imagine there can be, emerging out of all the different algorithms of trade settlements and power politics and family relationships, all the domains of being human, right? There must be diseases of that, or whatever a disease is, right? Disharmonies of that can result in, the engine knocking and this piece going, and then suddenly the whole junker doesn't seem worth having anymore. So that dysfunction can exist, I think, at a civilizational scale. If we can revert individually to wanting to be infantilized, what does that look like? That expression of humanity, what does that look like? Just lensed up a layer in what it is to be human across human social metrics. I don't know, but I can kind of see how that could tickle into a network of reactions such that, and here's my point, not all of this is by design. Just as you and I as individuals
Yeah.
can feel the pull and respond to the pull of heavy attractors, mimetic heavy attractors, I think many people at different levels of power have that same fundamental shared humanity, but there are still predators gauging and gaming all of that. But it's not all controlled. I just want that to be the main point. There is volitional hacking going on, but I think there's also sympathetic resonances set up. I think
Mhm.
that's a part of the correction mechanism, right, of the evolutionary dynamics of whatever this is.
No, there's a vague seed there in the sort of natural anatomy of the mind, of the psyche, that can be exploited. But the exploitation itself, again, the powerful have to exaggerate these little vague seeds. They have to express. Um, you could even say blow up, right? Mean and magnify that that sort of fundamental, I guess you would say, impulse, right? That's contained. It's contained as a murmur in the psyche of man, and they blow it up so they exaggerate it so they can exploit it. Yeah, so I think they do that for a lot of things. There's something else as well, which is, I think people have to understand, and I think you're sort of touching upon these ideas, is that man himself is fundamentally, in man there is contained in his psyche the potentiality for every single state that could be or ever has been, meaning psychological state, right, or psychological archetype or what have you. And basically the mind is simply just, in a similar way to what the sort of control grid is doing, it's exaggerating these certain states based upon namely our early developmental years, right? That's sort of the long-term mechanism that configures how we interact with the world and our persona and all of that. Our idea of the ego, and even our idea of our ideas themselves, how we think, how we formulate ideas, all of that. And then, of course, you have you have the control grid essentially works in a similar manner to the mind. The mind is exaggerating those things. It's taking the narrow bands of probability of potential, and it's bringing that out based upon certain, what's the word? Sort of certain external triggers that would, these triggers are they're sort of survival instincts, right? They bring out survival instincts in us. So they bring out certain personas within us. They bring out certain potentials within us. They bring out certain, certain behaviors, right? And this is why human beings, their minds are so plastic. They literally they're malleable, right? If they're brought into a certain state as adults, right?
Unhealthy minds, yes.
Unhealthy, trauma based, as well. If you, of course, if you manage to mold the human being early on in their developmental process, if you catch them early on, it's far easier to steer them through life as well, right? But that's the reason for education, the media, even, of course, the sort of brain rot content that younger and younger individuals are becoming hooked on just by really bad parenting and the proliferation of it throughout society. So I think as well that's, again, it's the control grid is not necessarily unnatural. It's simply just utilizing the architecture of nature against itself.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's like my point about the psychopaths before. They're human. They're horrible, but they're human. They are us. That is an element of us. These things are natural. If you consider a taxonomy of life forms, right? Invertebrates and then family, kingdom. I don't remember all of them. It's been years for me. But imagine that as logarithmic differences in capacities for mental activity, but the fundamentalness, right, from one phase down, it's always built into that, right? So I don't know where we are in that link of things that just need energy economics, but you're saying this is natural. Yes, it's natural. It's absolutely natural. Not all things that are natural are good for us, however, right? This is where agency and civilization and mind and spiritualism, they all play their part. And that's another marketplace for what it is to be human. I don't think we can imagine the new kinds of predators that are going to evolve in this new class of humans we're kind of thinking may be happening, right? This speciation or this divergence. And they may not survive it themselves. Just as the substrate we belong to is now speciating, they themselves will sprout new life, right? And new agents that respond to new markets, just as younger people today have a certain celerity and dexterity that older people don't. Older people, typically with more resources or status, they have the solidity of position and entrenchment, right? Those two fighting styles don't often kind of last or do well against each other at the tail end of things. And we all have a tail end of birth and death. It's all natural, yes.
Agreed. Agreed.
Well, with that, gentlemen, I'm going to have to head off. It's getting quite late here. I can
Yeah, I actually have to hop on to Ronin's podcast, which if everyone, once they leave here, if they want to check out whatever he's talking about over there on the Ronin Experience, youtube.com/BIRDOG45. I think I put it in the chat before. I'm probably going to hop on and just join him for a little bit.
I'll have a weekend watch. I
but,
enjoyed chatting, gentlemen.
But I really, really enjoyed this. And guys, we should definitely schedule something a little more in advance and do it again if you guys are both up for it, maybe this week.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Aurelius's ideas are fascinating.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure to have you on, Aurelius.
Please understand, a lot of these are not my ideas. They're just regurgitations from so many people. Very little of this is original, but it's been buried. And a lot of my notes are prepared with ChatGPT, but I'm not relying on LLMs to do the thinking for me. I'm using them in a very adversarial way, like almost as if they're a hostile witness, as a resource, right, to shave away some of the drudge work. I don't want folks to think that much of this is new or fresh. It's it's out there for everyone to see if you look at the world like an evil supervillain without succumbing to it, right? Think what our managerial elites are willing to do. Try and really imagine that. Don't fool yourself about it. Be honest. Think about some of the atrocious things that happen in the world, right? And then just think, my God, what won't they do? And that should put things into perspective. No one speaking about these things has any secrets to share. It's literally all open source.
Yeah.
With that, good night.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also, if either of you guys want to have any of your sites you want to share for people, go ahead and you could both do that.
Oh well, I have the YouTube channel, and I'm streaming this actually to my YouTube channel as
Yeah.
well.
And Silas, your links are in the description as well for this. And Aurelius, if you have any links you want me to share, just let me know, or send them to Silas, or you could send them to me on Telegram or wherever.
Thank you, but no thank you. No links.
Okay.
Cheers.
Well,
Aurelius, before I go as well, your voice sounds very, very familiar. Did you listen to and did you ever call into the Alan Watt show?
No.
No. So
No.
You know, Aurelius sounds like Jason, the guy on Crow 777's show, a little bit. Jason Lingren, I think his name is. Yeah, they have similar voice.
Oh no, there was just an individual that would call into the Alan Watt show years and years back. He has almost the exact same, cadence as you and accent. I just thought I would ask, but yeah, I was thinking that his voice sounds very familiar.
If you can maybe send me a link about, or maybe who I should look up when you have time. This isn't urgent. I'd be curious to hear him, because we all know when you hear your own voice, you go, fuck, that's me? What? So it's a completely different experience in your own head, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right,
Well,
guys.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, guys. We'll talk soon. Yeah.
Yeah, take it easy.
You too. Bye, guys. Thank
Bye.
you.